Once there was a sultan who had a son, and his son, the prince, was kind of a naughty prince because he was very spoiled. Whenever he wanted anything, the sultan would get it for him. And so the prince had every toy you could think of, and his very favorite toy was a little gold ball. And he would play with that gold ball every day. He loved to throw it up in the air and catch it. But his very favorite thing to do was to find a target a far way off. And he would throw the ball and hit the target. Now one day he decided that he was going to have a little bit of fun. And he sat outside of the palace. And as he sat there, he noticed an old woman walking up to get water from the spring in her jug. And he thought to himself, I bet that I can hit her jug with my golden ball from where I am right here. And as she reached down to get water in her jug, he took the ball and he took aim and he threw it, and her jar broke. The old woman was not happy about that, but she didn't want to confront the prince. So she went home and got another jug and came back with a second jug. And as she went to fill the second jug, again it broke. She went home and got a third jug. And as she came to refill the jug, this time from the spring, for the third time, the prince threw his golden ball and her jug shattered. This made the old woman very angry, and she turned to the prince and she said, My prince, I will say only this. May you fall in love with the silent princess. And then she walked away. Those words worried the prince. Who is the silent princess? What could it mean? What would happen to him if he fell in love with her? As he went in the palace, he started thinking about those words over and over until they took possession of his mind. And he didn't eat, and he didn't drink, and he was pale and sick and couldn't get out of bed because all he could think about were the old woman's words. And the sultan had doctors and healers come to try to make him well, but nothing helped. And finally, the prince told his father, the sultan, about what he had done, breaking the woman's jug 3 times, and what she had said. And he told his father, only way I will get better is if I go on a quest and find the silent princess. And so his father agreed, and the prince set on his way, and he journeyed for 6 months. He traveled through towns and villages and meadows and mountains and hills until finally he came to the base of a very large mountain. And as he looked up, he saw at the top of that mountain a beautiful palace that sparkled in the sun. And as he got even closer, he noticed that the palace was made entirely out of human skulls. That worried the prince a little bit, so he decided not to go up to the palace quite yet, but into the village that was right there. And as he entered the village, he heard a woman sobbing and wailing, saying, "My son, my son!" And the prince went to her and he said, "Woman, why are you so upset?" And she looked up at him and she said, "Why do you care? For it appears you too have come to die. For whoever goes meet with the king. And the king will kill whoever does not make the silent princess speak. And your skull will be added to those of the others on the palace. Oh, this news worried the prince very much. He didn't want his skull to be on the palace. He wanted to live, and he wanted to be in love with the princess. So he decided to stay in town for several days and see if he could come up with a plan so that he wouldn't have to die. And every day, the prince went into the marketplace. And one day, he saw a man there with a bird in a cage. And the bird was a nightingale. And the nightingale was small and brown and plain. But when he sang his song, it was so beautiful that it touched the prince's heart and made him so happy that he bought the nightingale and took him home with him and put him on the shelf. And that night, as the prince thought and thought about what he could do to make the silent princess speak, he became more and more sad. And he was losing hope. He thought there was nothing he could do. And then suddenly, he heard a voice. And the voice said, "Why so gloomy, my prince?" And the prince turned, and there was no one in the room but the nightingale, who was a magic nightingale. And so the prince told the nightingale all about his problem and that he needed to make the princess speak. And the nightingale said, "Do not worry, my prince, for I will help you. The silent princess wears 7 veils, and so she cannot see you, and you cannot see her. So take me with you tonight to the princess's palace and put me under the lamp. And then you must ask the princess how she is doing. She will not respond, but leave it to me after that." So the prince was very encouraged because he thought, maybe finally I will get to be able to live and make the silent princess fall in love with me. So the prince took the nightingale up the mountain all the way to the palace made of skulls. And he met first with the king. And the king told him, "Prince, thousands have come and tried to make my silent princess speak, and thousands have failed. And thousands of skulls make up this palace. Are you ready to take that risk? For if you succeed, you will win the hand of my fair daughter." The prince threw himself on the ground, bowing to the king, and he said, "King, I am ready to try." So the king escorted him to the princess's room. And when they were there, the princess sat silently with 7 veils covering her face. But even still, the prince knew in his heart that she was a good, beautiful princess. So he put the nightingale under the lamp, and he said to the princess, "Princess, how are you today?" She did not respond. And the prince said, "Princess, the weather is beautiful. I'm sure you would like to go for a walk." The princess did not respond. So finally the prince said, "Well, fine then. You will not speak to me. I fear I must speak to this lamp, for I'm sure it has more personality." And he turned to the lamp and he said, "Lamp, how are you today?" And it seemed the lamp answered back, "Well, my prince, I am well. Nobody ever speaks to me, but I have so much to say. May I tell you a story?" And the prince agreed. And the nightingale told this story. Once there was a beautiful princess who lived in a beautiful castle with a wonderful father. But the princess had a problem, for there were 3 princes who wanted to marry her, and she could not decide which one she loved best. So her father, the king, told the 3 men, "I will give you 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, whichever of you has proved himself best will win the hand in marriage of my daughter." The 3 men agreed, and they set out on their own journeys. The first man learned how to take a 6-month journey in only 1 hour. He could travel that fast. The second man could make himself entirely invisible. And the third man could bring the dead back to life. And so at the end of the time, the 3 men met up far away from the princess's castle. And the first man, who could make himself invisible, said, "While I was invisible, I have visited the princess, and she is very ill, and she will die in only 2 hours. The second man, who could bring someone back to life, said, "I will prepare a medicine right away that will save her life." And the third man, who could travel very, very quickly, said, "I will take that medicine to her." And so he did. And as soon as the medicine touched the princess's lips, she awoke and was well. At this point, the nightingale turned to the prince and said, "Prince, tell me, who do you think of the 3 men showed themselves to be the best?" And the prince said, "Why, of course, it was the man who made the medicine. For if she had not the medicine, she would have surely died." And the second man, and then the nightingale said, No. Surely it was he who had made himself invisible. For if he didn't know the princess was sick, she would have surely died." The 2 argued back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The whole time, the silent princess, underneath her veil, sat listening to them. And she thought to herself, "But they are forgetting the man who could travel so quickly. For if he hadn't taken the medicine to her in time, she would have surely died." And the silent princess thought this thought, while the prince and the nightingale argued, until finally she could take it no more, and she lifted her veils and she yelled, "You fools! You are forgetting the man who could travel quickly, who took her the medicine, for surely he proved himself best." The princess had spoken, and the prince had rightfully won the chance to marry her. There was great celebration throughout all of the land, and the whole land celebrated for 40 days and 40 nights. And the prince, who had learned his lesson, found the old woman whose jug he had broken, and he went to her, and he apologized, and he told her, "Old woman, I am so sorry." And he appointed her to be the nurse of the palace, where she served happily for the rest of her days.
Yay!